People watch the Olympics for glory, for the sweat, the flags, the cheering crowd, the impossible moments where humans break the limits of their own bodies. But behind every medal, behind every anthem, lies a truth the world rarely sees. Some athletes paid the ultimate price for a dream they could never finish. This is not a story about winning. This is a story about the moments when time froze, when stadiums went silent, when families waited for someone who never walked back home. Tonight, we go deep into the darkest tragedies in Olympic history, stories the world tried to forget, but the families never could. And by the end of this story, you will understand why some heroes never needed a medal to be remembered forever. The night the ice turned red in the winter of 1961, a young American figure skater named Elena Carter stepped onto the Olympic ice for the last practice before the world would watch her compete. She wasn't the favorite to win. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest. But she had something no one else had, a fire inside her that refused to go out. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep Elena in skating lessons, staying up late at night sewing the sparkly dresses her daughter wore in competitions. Elena always said, "If I ever win gold, it won't be mine, it'll be yours." Those words kept her pushing when her legs were numb, when her lungs burned, when the ice felt colder than loneliness itself. The night before her biggest competition, Elena stayed on the ice longer than she should have. The stadium was empty. Only the sound of her blades echoed in the giant frozen hall. She was practicing her triple axel, the jump that could change her life. She spun and fell. Hard. Her coach ran toward her, but Elena laughed through the pain. "If I give up now, coach, someone else will live the life I'm supposed to live." That was the last time anyone heard her laugh. The next morning, the team plane carrying Elena, her coaches, and the entire US figure skating delegation took off for Europe. Elena sat by the window, clutching her mother's handmade costume, whispering the routine she had practiced since childhood. Above the clouds, she wrote a note in her journal. "If I don't win, I'll try again next Olympics. I'm not done yet." But fate had already chosen a different ending. Just before the plane reached its destination, the engines failed. Witnesses on the ground described the aircraft spiraling like a wounded bird, fighting to stay afloat. The plane crashed in a field of snow, scattering fire across the frozen earth. Not a single person survived. When the news hit the Olympic Village, athletes dropped to their knees. Coaches cried openly. Entire nations stood in silence. Elena's mother received her luggage a month later, a small suitcase filled with her daughter's dreams, her skates, and the dress she had sewn with her own hands. Inside the pocket was that note. "I'll try again next Olympics." The world didn't lose a champion that day. It lost a daughter, a sister, a dreamer. And for the first time, people began to question the price of chasing Olympic glory across the sky. But this wasn't the last tragedy. It wasn't even the worst. Something even darker was waiting, not in the air, but on the ground, on the deadliest track the Olympics had ever built, the track that should have never been made. Vancouver, 2010. The Winter Olympic Village buzzed with excitement, but behind the cheering crowds and polished ceremonies, engineers whispered about a track designed to push athletes beyond human limits. It was called the Whistler's Sliding Center, a steel serpent of ice, towering higher, steeper, and faster than anything the world had ever seen. Luge athletes privately called it the dead drop, but no one dared say it on camera. They signed the papers, tightened their helmets, and told their families not to worry. Among them was a young Georgian luger, Nico Baradze, only 21 years old, competing in his first Olympics. He wasn't rich. He didn't have world-class equipment. His sled was older than he was. But he carried something stronger than any sponsor could give: pride for a small country that had finally sent him to the world stage. Before leaving home, his father hugged him and said, "Even if you finish last, you'll still be the first hero of Georgia I'll ever know." Nico practiced on the track for days. Every run shook his bones. Every curve felt like a test of fate. Athletes from other nations crashed again and again, skidding into icy walls, but the officials insisted everything was safe enough. They were wrong. On the morning of the final training run, cameras captured Nico sitting alone at the top of the track, breathing slowly, trying to calm the storm inside his chest. He whispered a prayer, kissed the cross his mother had given him, and pushed off. Within seconds, he was flying 120 km/h. 130. 140. The fastest a human body had ever moved on a sled. The world blurred into streaks of silver and blue. Commentators gasped. Coaches clenched their fists. One wrong movement could be fatal. Then it happened. A tiny shift of weight. A vibration on the ice. A curve so sharp it felt like a blade. Nico's sled slammed into the wall. His body launched into the air like a rag doll thrown by a giant. He hit a steel pole beside the track, a pole that should never have been exposed. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the mountains. The world froze. Medics rushed in. Cameras cut away. Athletes cried on live television. Nico's father, watching from home, collapsed to his knees. The Olympic Committee called it a tragic accident. But athletes knew the truth. The track was too fast, too dangerous, too unforgiving. Nico wasn't the first to crash. He was just the first not to rise again. In Georgia, he was buried with the flag he carried on his sled. In Vancouver, the Olympics modified the track, raised the walls, slowed the speeds, but only after a life had already been taken. Only after a young man's dream, a family's pride, and a nation's hope had been silenced. And with that, the world learned a painful lesson. Sometimes the Olympics push too far, and the cost of going too far is death. When we look back at the Olympics, we remember the champions, the world records, the celebrations. But the silent heroes, the ones who never made it home, they deserve to be remembered too. Their stories remind us that every dream carries a risk, every victory carries a shadow, and every athlete is more than a competitor. They are someone's child, someone's heartbeat, someone's entire world. The Olympics will continue. New stars will rise. New medals will shine. But Elena, Nico, and every athlete who died chasing a dream, their legacy burns brighter than gold. Because true heroes aren't the ones who stand on the podium. They're the ones who chase their dreams, even when the world isn't watching.